Okay, we are live. Thank you everyone for being here with us today. Today we have the privilege to be with an experienced entrepreneur and investors through multiple industries and verticals. And he will be sharing us the biggest lessons he has learned through economic crisis and what they have taught him and how he's applying them to today and to pivoting under COVID. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Wolf. And this is a fireside chat. Anyone is welcome to ask questions at any time. All they have to do is write the Street Entrepreneurs Facebook page. If you are joining us from the Zoom, you can also ask questions in the chat. Otherwise, I will be moderating your questions through the Street Entrepreneurs Facebook page. Awesome. Feel free to take it away.
Thank you, Juliana. So my name is Wolf. I'm the chairman of a company called EastBanc Technologies. I'm actually dialing in from our office in Georgetown, Washington, D.C. And Juliana and I now know each other for a number of years. So I know she's going to interrupt me and highlight a few things. I'm a pretty flexible person. So if anybody just wants to ask questions in between, feel free to do that. I don't have a presentation. I don't believe in this type of rigid conversation. I rather want to just do it off the cuff. I know what I'm going to talk about because it's my life and my hobby. So I'm first just going to introduce myself, tell you a little bit about me, and I know the theme of this discussion is resilience, how resilience was built into my personal DNA throughout my life. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit about our company, how our company has been built essentially for resilience, some other activities that I have, and then I'm going to tell you about our team, which is the most important component of everything that you need to align correctly in order to be resilient and thrive in periods of complete disruption. Which is what we're in today. So why don't I start with today, where in my observation, we're now facing, at least in the United States, 4 crises all converging in one. And there is a good saying, and I do believe in it, that you should never let a crisis go to waste, never let a good crisis go to waste. So what an opportunity, because we have 4 crises that we should not let go to waste. That doesn't mean that you have to be able to spend a lot of money. You have to invoke your brain cells and not be shocked by it. And you should not be able to allow yourself to be inward looking. You have to analyze what is happening and prepare yourself for the next time around, because there will be another one. So you can see I have a little bit of gray hair, and I've lived through multiple crises by now. So this is, to me, just another rodeo. The first one that I had to live through was the currency crisis under Ronald Reagan. I was part of the Cold War. Russian soldiers were essentially just outside of my hometown in Western Germany, Nuremberg, which is where I was born. I got used to this type of, how would you call it, bizarre lifestyle. And then came, of course, the internet bubble of 2000, which I was in the heart of. And I'm going to tell you something about that as well. Then came the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. And now here we are again. We have an economic crisis. You may have heard that the United States economy contracted by 1/3 in the last quarter. You may have heard that 30 million or 31 million Americans have lost their jobs in the last 6 months or so and are unemployed as we speak. That's close to 10% of the population. We have a public health crisis. As I walk into our office, I have to wear a mask, I have to wear gloves. I have to make sure that my team members are extremely protected. And I'm glad to say that we took this very seriously, very quickly. So nobody here has been infected. I have a team of 200 globally. None of them have been infected. None of their family members have been infected. Nobody has died. So I often tell the team that even just in that one component of the current crisis, we're on the island of the lucky, and probably we are the luckiest on this island of the lucky. The third crisis that I see today is a societal crisis. You may have seen the demonstrations and the riots and the reactions to them, both positive and negative. This, of course, is a disruption. And then we have a political crisis where the parties, at least in the United States, don't seem to be able to talk with each other anymore and focus on solving problems. So that leaves us with, we have to solve these problems. And we can't solve the world's problems. We have to solve the problems that are straight in front of us. Through luck, there's an old saying that to be successful, there's really three components. The first 50%, you have to work harder than everybody else. You have to outwork them. 50% depends on being smarter than everybody else and outsmart them. And 50% is luck. So 150% in order to have 100% likelihood of being successful. You can't have them all, but if you combine them all, you will be successful. So there's no way for you to have all three aspects perfectly aligned at any given moment, which means you have to be extremely flexible, but also you have to be able to look ahead. You don't have the luxury of focusing on the tactical problems only and forgetting about the strategic opportunities and problems that you have to prepare for. And so this is today's world. And I'm happy to report that we are growing fast. We're hiring as fast as we can. And I'll give you the reason for that before I go into the history of what got me personally here and what got the company and my team here to be this resilient. So for a very long time, my company is an enterprise software company that is a very specific portion of the IT industry, which means we work with enterprise class type of companies and organizations, from a NASDAQ to a Comcast to a Facebook to a Microsoft, but also with startups that are in that space that we need to bring up to that level as fast as we can. So they are enterprise software startups that we work with. So that's our niche. And as part of this, we've talked for a very, very long time and specialized on digital transformation. And there's 4 books that I'm rereading right now that I've read quite a number of times, and I can only recommend them, but they really only apply to my particular niche. But there's other books that probably apply to your particular niche as entrepreneurs. And you should use them as your reminder as you struggle through the current times and as you prepare for the next time around, which will come. So the first book is Digital Transformation. It was written by a luminary in the tech industry called Tom Siebel, but it's the subheader that really caught my attention a long time ago. And it's called How to Survive in an Era of Mass Extinction. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. Remember the numbers that I just told you about. I think in Silicon Valley, about 70,000 engineers have lost their job in the last few months. So this is affecting everybody. So this is book number 1. And then you combine that very staged, very long-term planning of a digital transformation with a book called The Black Swan. And if you haven't read it yet, please read it. It's by a philosopher called Taleb Nassim, Nassim Taleb. No, Taleb Nassim, sorry. You see how I'm not perfect at all, and that's completely fine. So the Black Swan is not the virus. We all knew that there would be a pandemic one day or another. But in my world, what I for sure did not foresee is the digital Black Swan of the internet backbone not holding up anymore, of digital supply chains not being able to deliver, for God's sake, toilet paper to your local grocery store when you needed it, for Netflix having to reduce the bandwidth or the pixelation of their streams in order to not bring the internet down. What I did not foresee is e-commerce systems not being able to handle the onslaught. What I did not foresee as a digital Black Swan is that phone systems are have not prepared for this type of phone calling patterns that we're now seeing, with people calling at random times from home instead of from the office, for which they were optimized, and so on. So this is the digital Black Swan. You combine digital transformation with a digital black swan, and what you're getting is digital Darwinism. And this is exactly what is happening today. Digital Darwinism, Darwin is often misquoted, is not the survival of the fittest. You guys can survive just as well. It's survival of the most adaptable. The ones that adapt survived the meteor strike. So you had dinosaurs like a T-Rex and so on that gladly did not survive, because I don't want to be eaten by someone like that. But other dinosaurs adapted to become digital crocodiles, or crocodiles, turtles, birds. Those are all dinosaurs that have survived the meteor strike because they were adaptable. And at the same time, you have mammals that emerged and jumped from the trees. Here we are, and saw all these wide green savannas in Africa in front of them and said, let's go eat. This is the time. Let's grow into elephants. We have the same equivalent in my world again, and the same is true in your world, whatever your industry may be. But I can really only talk about my world, and hopefully you have the ability for you to transform that into your particular context. We have digital dinosaurs coming to us saying, we are the equivalent of a T-Rex. How can I become a digital turtle in order to survive this crazy time, this bizarre time? And we have digital mammals jumping off the trees saying, the dinosaurs are gone, we're not being eaten anymore, let's go eat the grass out in the savannah. So this is what I observe, digital Darwinism. I happen to be right in the pivot table here, or the pivot point that enables that and grows from it, which means book number 4, Anti-Fragile, again from Taleb Nassim. This time I got the name right. We, by chance and luck, hard work, and trying to outsmart everybody, and this is not meant to be me. This is really having assembled a team that outsmarts me every single day, and therefore allows us to outsmart others every single day. We combined all these 3 factors that I talked about, and we've become an anti-fragile company. We thrive during times of crisis. It has happened before, and it'll happen again, and it is happening today. And so I hope, Juliana, correct me if I'm wrong, there's already a few lessons in this that would be worth considering, at least, humbly. So this is my preamble. And I know we have 1 hour. I don't want to talk for the entire hour. Interrupt me right away. Have Juliana interrupt me if you want to. Otherwise, I'm going to talk a little bit about me, what got me here, where I'm sitting in front of you, and I'm happy that I can share some of the lessons that I've learned.
So Wolf, quick question. I'm already seeing this kind of pop up in the Facebook Messenger. Was this a conscious decision or a conscious plan? Did you sit down to say, how can I build the most resilient company possible? What are all the possible catastrophes that might come my way? Were you predicting a pandemic? Was that part of your strategic plan?
We knew that something like a pandemic would arrive. We knew that something like a financial crisis would arrive. Crises will happen. We just don't know the form of them. That's why the black swans. I don't know if you know where the terminology of the black swan comes from, but I'll just quickly, bore you with it. When Europeans talked about swans, all swans were white, and then they discovered Africa, and all swans in Africa were white, and they went to Asia, and all Asian swans were white. They came to North America, and all of our swans were white, and to South America, and all the swans were white. All swans were white until they arrived in Australia, where all swans were black. That's a black swan. You just cannot predict it based on your previous experience. You just couldn't have predicted that there would be black swans. And there's lots of these types of thinking that you just cannot predict the black swan. Yet you have to prepare yourself for it, because inevitably something like it will happen in your context. So this digital black swan event is what we prepare for consciously. Our world is the digital world, and therefore we had to prepare for a digital black swan event. And it takes, as I said, 3 factors It's you have to outwork everyone, you have to try to outsmart everyone, and you have to be lucky. There's always luck in entrepreneurialism. It's just a fact. Juliana reminded me to talk about some of those failures where you still see the act dropping off my face from those failures. There's a good saying that stupid people, forgive my language, but stupid people don't learn from their own mistakes. Normal people learn from their own mistakes. Geniuses learn from other people's mistakes. I'm literally trying every single day to get from the third level to the second level. I will never reach the genius level, but it means that at least I'm trying to learn from my mistakes, and I have plenty of them. Not just me, but the team, my previous employers, the startups that I get exposed to, the Goliath companies that I have the privilege of working with who happen to die or go bankrupt or whatever have you. And all you really have to do is learn from these lessons and prepare for that black swan. Whatever that black swan will be, you just don't know what that black swan will be in your context. So yes, this was conscious, but really not from a genius level, for sure not. It was just trying to simply analyze your days and analyze your years.
Right.
Lessons that really make a difference.
So Zoom has begun to give us problems. It is kicking people out of the Zoom, unfortunately, and it's messing up your audio. So I'm going to go ahead and mute you and then unmute you. Sometimes that does the trick. So give us 1 second.
I'm going to put earphones in. That also sometimes helps.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then, so guys, if you were part of the individuals kicked out of the Zoom, feel free to watch on Facebook Live. It is precisely the reason we do Facebook Lives, because sometimes this happens. But today we wanted to try something a little bit different. We wanted to have a fireside chat so that some of you would have the opportunity to interact directly with Wolf and interrupt and ask questions. But for everyone else, you can watch on Facebook Live. And Wolf, would you like to try once again?
Hopefully, let's give it a try and just let us know if the audio still doesn't work.
Yeah, it sounds a bit robotic. Do you mind rejoining? I'm going to go ahead and remove you, and then if you don't mind joining again, that would be wonderful.
Of course.
Thank you guys for bearing with us. And in the meantime, I want to welcome you. I see a lot of familiar faces, and I'm so happy you guys are here with us. I know we have different cohorts represented. So for those of you who don't know, street entrepreneurs accept anyone who has talent. And by that, we mean they have firsthand experience of the problems they're solving. Who is a little bit crazy because they see a world that doesn't exist. And finally, who has a lot of grit and have the ability to solve those problems. And then we place people into different cohorts depending on their phase of business and their industry. This particular workshop was put together with our technology cohort in mind and with our scalable products venture-bound cohort in mind. But of course, anyone can benefit from this workshop and anyone can attend. So I'm very happy to see we have different cohorts represented. And Wolf, I see you're back and you're unmuted. If you'd like to once again take over, and hopefully the sound quality is better. Once again, if you got kicked out of the Zoom, please join us on Street Entrepreneurs Facebook Live or EastBanc Facebook Live.
Yeah. How's the audio now, Juliana?
Oh,
yay! All right. Even Joshua gives me a thumbs up. Thank you.
Awesome.
So I covered, the current situation and how I think everyone has to deal with these types of events in their particular context. From my perspective, everyone has their own truth, but it is my truth. That's what I've experienced. That's what brought me here. So I promised I would talk a little bit about myself, if that's still okay, Juliana?
Yes, please.
Okay. So if you Google me, you'll find an article out there that calls me the citizen of the world or a global citizen or something like this. It's really true. I was born in Nuremberg in Germany. Um, my parents were entrepreneurs, just like you. My mom had a small cheese shop with 110 different types of cheese. As a family, every week we had to try 20 different types of cheese in order to select the 10 that she would
For
replace.
you. For
Oh,
you. Oh my
absolutely.
God. That's amazing.
It's amazing. And so, we selected the 10 that she would put into her shop, and we selected the 10 that she would replace in her shop. Nothing crazy, just an entrepreneur. And my dad, same thing. He escaped Czechoslovakia, how it was called at the time, when the Russians invaded the country. He went all the way through Germany to South America, but he remembered my mom. I was born shortly thereafter, after he returned. Um, and now I'm 51 years old. I have two children, Lucas 16 and Sienna 14. My wife is an entrepreneur. I am an entrepreneur, so it kind of rubs off on you, I guess, and even if you don't want it to. So after Nuremberg, I was pretty spoiled. And one day my dad, when I was 13, and I promise I'll keep it as short as I can. When I was 13, my dad surprised me one day. I came home from the swimming pool and he asked me if I had studied my Spanish yet. I asked him, I don't have Spanish classes. And he said, oh, I must have forgotten to tell you that I signed you up for Spanish class. So 3 months, grumpy, I went there. 3 months later, he asked me if I had packed my suitcases yet. Remember, I was 13. And I said, where are we going? It's the middle of the school year. He said, not we, you're going to Peru, South America, to go to high school there for an extended period of time, because I have a feeling that you don't really have a sense for the world, that you're getting a little spoiled and a little comfortable in your own world. So I'm, of course, as a good dad or a good parent, he prepared for me to be safe and all these kinds of things. But I've iterated, and this is a theme that I would like to encourage everyone to think about at least, is I iterated outside of my comfort zone. I was still in a comfort zone. My dad had ensured it, but I was absolutely inside of an uncomfort zone, completely protected, but new experiences, new life. After that, I was addicted to the world. I spent probably 6 months in Morocco. I went to high school in France, in Great Britain, in Australia. All of that then on my own, in my own motivation. I returned back to Germany, finished high school. In the meantime, the wall had come down. My dad and I discovered, and my mom, of course, but not as often. We discovered Eastern Europe. We helped some companies there to understand what it means to suddenly be thrust into Western society and capitalism. After that, I decided that it would be quite interesting for me to attend business school. This was the biggest waste of my time ever. So if you ever think about an MBA, then please ask me, because no matter what I have 3 questions about this, and no matter what your answer will be, I'll hopefully convince you to not waste your time. It took me 7 years. I started in a business school in Germany, the best of the best, supposedly. It was a waste of time. So I thought maybe, because at that time, the Japanese had bought the Rockefeller Center in New York City. And it was a shock to the United States, because the Rockefeller Center is the heart of capitalism, in the heart of capitalism, of the most capitalist country in the world, and the Japanese had just bought that. So I thought, maybe the Japanese have figured out how to do, this business thing better than anybody else. I went to Tokyo University. Again, everything that you learn there was common sense. My mom often told me when I told her, the kinds of things that I had learned, that this was just common sense, even without having a high school degree. She already knew that from her cheese shop, so I was a bit disillusioned. Then I thought, you Americans charge so much for your business schools, there must be a reason for it. So why don't I sneak into one of your business schools to kind of get a sense for why the magic is there that costs so much. Again, nothing but common sense. I went back to Germany, finished my degree. Before I had finished my degree, I had already received a job offer from a technology company here in just outside of Washington, D.C. Company was called MicroStrategy. I was probably employee 200, 250 of that company. And here's something that Juliana wanted me to tell you about. So we grew that company at breakneck speed. We were very proud of growing 100%, both in revenue and in number of employees, year after year after year after year. At the peak, we were 2,700 team members. I had recruited many of them myself. I was a mentor for many of them myself. And then the illusion broke. The stock imploded, the internet bubble imploded. And I happened to be one of those stubborn people that did not leave the company or cash out. But I stuck around. My mom is a very stubborn German, and so I guess that rubbed off on me. I decided for myself that I will either go down with that thing until it hits the ground, or I will have played a role in fixing it. So I ended up with a spreadsheet of 2,000 names of 2,700 team members that needed to be let go super fast. There was not much rational thinking behind it. We just had to reduce cost. So I cannot even count the number of exit interviews that I was in anymore. We worked 24 hours, 7 days a week, slept in the office in order to rescue this company. That's where I lost all my hair. So, you just don't want to go through having to let go of team members that you painfully hired, that you spend days and nights and weekends with, that you saw grow up professionally, and they saw you grow up professionally. There was no difference between them and me, yet I was the one that had to let them go, and it felt terrible every single day. And even now talking about it, I get emotional because this is hard. But there has to be a greater purpose for you than just emotionally react to events. That's why I'm sometimes called an emotional Spock. You have to be able to compartmentalize and put the greater good ahead of yourself and ahead of others. And that's what powered me through it. So you have to compartmentalize, you have to do what has to be done, and you have to be relentless at it. You just can't stop. You can't hunker down in self-pity and bemoan the fact that this is happening. You have to jump into action. This was one of the actions that I just had to take part in. There was just no other choice. So long story short, a few years later, the company was healthy again. I remember sitting around with 6 that had sworn that we would be that team that would save that company or die with it professionally. We looked at the numbers. We were the 6th most profitable publicly traded company in the United States again, and I was exhausted. I took a 6-month sabbatical because during that time I had literally missed the birth of Lucas, my 16-year-old. I was on my BlackBerry trying to, get deals done, make sure that everything is going well, that we collect the money that we needed to collect. And during that sabbatical, 6 months, Sienna was born. I was a good father this time. And I was completely convinced that I would go back to MicroStrategy because I made lots of money. I created lots of bonds on a personal level. Nothing creates this type of bond more than a crisis. So even to this day, I'm still part of what we call the MicroStrategy Mafia. That's a network that emerged not out of planning, but because of having lived through the successes and the extreme failures and the rebuilding of something special. And so, these types of lessons then brought me to EastBanc Tech. I swore to myself on day one when I started at EastBanc Tech, it took me a long time to get my head wrapped around that I would leave MicroStrategy, not come back after my sabbatical, and join this puny little company in Georgetown that had no brand, a crazy name that was not marketable, was tiny in comparison to what MicroStrategy was. But I became the CEO. And on day one, I swore to myself and I gave a speech to the team that the lessons I had learned will be applied at EastBanc Tech consciously. There was a question about, do I do these kinds of things consciously? I do. Do I make mistakes? Of course, all the time. But do I learn from them? Yes. So some of the lessons that I learned is I will never go through layoffs again, ever in my entire life. This is heartbreaking. And it really creates hardships for people that you typically should care about because they're your team members. And so we try to build this company up in a way that it does have this resilience to it, that we will thrive during crisis. Thriving during crisis is unplannable, but it's just so happened. So we just wanted to build a great business that is resilient. We have become anti-fragile, so we overshot a little bit, which is of course great, and it benefits us even more. So this is about me. This covers or touches a little bit on EastBanc Tech. I covered before how we build this resilience consciously, sometimes through sheer luck, into EastBanc Tech. I'll tell you a few other things that I do for a living.
Let me interrupt real quick because I have a couple of questions coming in before you
Yay.
go. So
always better than a monologue.
Awesome. So do you have any advice for entrepreneurs that are having to lay people off?
Do it fast. Don't think about it too much. And try to do it in the most humble, in the most conscientious way that you can. Reach out to people like me, if you have them, to try to find a path forward for them if you cannot provide it. So some of the things that I've done over the last 6 months, ever since these layoffs and firings have started occurring, if you look me up on LinkedIn, one of my posts is that if I know you and if I can get a voucher of somebody that I know for you, I will help you place your team members in spots that are hopefully a good, parking spot at least. But as far as you as an entrepreneur are concerned, if you find yourself in this situation now and it is inevitable, do it fast. Rip off the Band-Aid as quickly as you can. Don't look back. It's a necessary evil of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, why do you say do it fast? So it might be that someone is trying to see like, okay, maybe we bounce back and we have enough capital to retain our people. Should there be a vaccine by December, I could hold off with XYZ
Sure.
loan or with XYZ
Yeah.
raise until then.
Yeah.
Why do it fast?
So what ifs in these types of scenarios are typically killers. You can literally spend, maybe you've heard of this term, paralysis by analysis and hope. You may analyze yourself to death, literally, your company. And so you just don't have the luxury of a what if. If you have a feeling that this is necessary right now, you have to do it right now. And it leads me to some of the mistakes I made that you, Juliana, wanted me to cover. So I'm happy to go there, but we can cover some more questions first.
Perfect. Okay, so there's another question that says, how much money should you have set aside for each employee when you're building a company?
That's a tricky one. So what I always believe in is that, and you have to find your own rules on these types of things, but you have to have enough capital in the bank in order to survive without revenue for at least 3 to 6 pay cycles. If you cannot pivot your company in order to become revenue generating within that period of time, it may be time to turn off the company if it cannot survive a situation like that.
Awesome. Yeah.
Rule of thumb may be completely wrong, but that's my rule of thumb.
Yeah. So I'm trying to merge a couple questions, but I think I'll come back to them because I have a feeling we can cover this.
Sure.
So feel free
Go
to.
for it. Pardon?
Well, it discusses, so how do you design a company to minimize the risk of layoffs as much as possible?
See, that's a good one. When I first, this is a word of wisdom. I happen to have a really wise shareholder in EastBanc Tech. His name is Anthony Lanier. And when he first invited me, I lived in New York City at the time. I was in the heart of capitalism. I did well for MicroStrategy, took my sabbatical, came to Georgetown for a week to just give him some advice. And I asked him, how come you became a commercial real estate developer? So I'm not a commercial real estate developer. I'm a risk manager. My entire life is based on managing risk. It happens to be commercial real estate today, a technology company tomorrow, maybe some banking in the meantime, but it is risk management. And there's no golden rule for you to become a risk manager, but it is an iron rule that every entrepreneur in the heart of heart should be a risk manager. If you're a coffee shop owner, you're a coffee shop owner. You're not a risk manager, which means if your coffee shop gets into trouble, you are in trouble. But if you're a risk manager, the coffee shop just happens to be the embodiment of you as an entrepreneur. And 5 years from now, you may be a technology company that happens to own a coffee shop. You've managed your risk and you've become adaptable to these types of events.
Got it. Awesome. I could ask about the ingredients of risk management, but we'll come back to that
I
because
would be struggling. I would have to call my professor for risk management, who I was laughing at the time. It just emerges inside of you, and it really comes from this trying to learn from your own mistakes, which is extremely hard because you just don't want to admit to yourself when you look in the mirror that you've made mistakes, but everyone has. So the earlier you can come to this self-realization, the earlier you will be able to become a risk manager. And so, I'm happy to cover some of those failures that
yeah,
I've encountered. Where, as I told you, egg is still dripping off my face, and it will always be there.
go for it. Go for it.
Okay. Um, so let's start with MicroStrategy. First of all, I'm an extremely loyal person. This is only my second professional job in my life. I don't shy away from long-term commitments. I don't shy away from hard times. That's when you have to double down. So at MicroStrategy, we made quite a number of mistakes, and they're all publicly available. You can research them. Now you know someone who was there who may have taken the faxes out of the fax machine and enabled the mistakes, or who had at least some fingerprints on some of the startup companies that we incubated ourselves that failed or may not have. It's debatable, but all of that is in the public domain. So I'm not going to dwell on it. EastBanc Tech mistakes and Wolf's personal mistakes. So when I first came to this company, it was just a software service company. We build software for other people in the most basic way. But we happen to have the most brilliant team members that I've ever encountered, which of course, the title of this fireside chat is about resilient teams. So, one ingredient that we have in abundance in EastBanc Tech is team members that are smarter than me, that have no rival, at least in my, arrogant personal opinion, but that's fine. So with a team like that, how can you possibly make mistakes? As a service company, you have certain profit margins that are essentially linear to the number of team members you have. So you get very quickly seduced into thinking you've got to hire as many team members as you possibly can, because then you will increase your revenue linearly, and therefore you will increase your profit, not exponentially, but to a larger degree, to be able to have gas in everyone's car and food in everyone's fridge. But there is a way to have exponential growth, and that exponential growth lies in the creation of intellectual property. It's very seductive. So when I first came to EastBanc Tech, we immediately set out to start building intellectual property in the form of a software product. I tried to convince companies and IBM research labs and whoever to adopt this product. Because if you think about it, a software product literally can be burned on the CD in the olden times, and that CD could be worth $1 or it could be worth $1 million. But to produce the CD costs you 10 cents. So no matter what, the more CDs you sell, the higher your profit margins are exponentially. So it's very seductive as a software company to go into the IP creation world. This IP, we called it Source Track, just didn't fly off the shelf. We had people that would say this is, it's revolutionary, it's innovative. Of course, because I have this revolutionary, innovative, super smart team. It was, there's no doubt about it, but it didn't sell. It took a long, long time for me to admit, and I think for all of us to admit that this was a mistake. 3-4 years after the creation of the product with $0 in revenue, we finally decided to shut it down. We should have done that with a plan and given ourselves 1 year. You try to sell it within the first quarter, you adapt from it. Second quarter, you adapt from it. Third quarter, you adapt from it. In the fourth quarter, either you've started generating revenue and hopefully become cash flow positive. You've got to shut it down. Otherwise, you are, remember, on that stupid people don't learn from their own mistakes type of level. That's where I was. And, trying to elevate myself into the second level. Similarly, at one point, we happened to have a customer in the Middle East. Everyone has, some impressions of the Middle East as far as the economy is concerned, capitalism is concerned, easy money is concerned. I was right there with you. And we opened an office in Dubai and tried to find customers for EastBanc Tech. 1 year goes by, multiple trips to Dubai to visit the team over there, nothing had happened. 3 years later, we finally admitted to ourselves that we've made a mistake, we've wasted ungodly amounts of money that we could have reinvested into the service business in order to ensure the resilience of EastBanc Tech versus creating something that obviously has turned into a risk factor. Everything that you do in new business creation or new revenue creation has to reduce your risk profile. If it increases your risk profile without outrageous returns that are feasible within a predetermined period of time, don't go in there. So those are some of the mistakes that I've made, and I could keep going and going and going.
Awesome. I'm really curious as to for those we've gotten some questions about like people tuning in from different parts of the world, and for international business, is there a way of doing business in America that's a little bit different from Europe or from the Middle East?
So first of all, it all boils down, and you ask me if someone comes to an investor. I am an investor, and I've invested into multiple startup companies. I happen to be extremely lucky in this in this field. So there's qualifications that convince someone like me to at least have a conversation with you. And I don't do much of this, so don't even get your hopes up. But I'm a tough guy to get involved into, but at the same time, once I'm involved, I am involved. Just a fair warning. I always look for 3 ingredients. It's the team. There has to be somebody who is absolutely passionate about this, even if it means 0 salary, nights and days of work, and extreme pain or excitement. So that's number 1. Number 2 is you have to have some sort of product. In my world, that's an enterprise software product. It might be coffee, you name it. And that product has to be translatable into a market, whatever that market may be. And the translation mechanism is cash. And you have to get to this cash translation mechanism as quickly as you can. That means that if you feel that your product is applicable in Europe or in the Middle East or wherever it may be, better prove it there first. Prove it in your backyard. Because if you try to build something from Europe that may apply in the United States, maybe you've just exponentially increased your cost and your risk. It has to be inside of your comfort zone, whatever that comfort zone may be, geographically, product knowledge, customer knowledge, market knowledge, whatever it may be, and find the shortest path to this translation mechanism of cash. Once you do that, you get out of your comfort zone, and you may already pick up a few themes that I keep replaying in my own life, which is why I keep repeating them here, and I keep preaching them everywhere I encounter entrepreneurs. Get comfortable in your comfort zone first. In the world of an entrepreneur, that is the shortest way to cash, and then consciously add a layer of uncomfort zone towards that. And that uncomfort zone may be the United States if you're in Europe. It should probably be your neighboring country first, or your neighboring county first, to just stay in the geographic sphere. It may be in the product sphere, another feature that you may add to the core product that has already started generating revenue or cash. I like to use the hard word, cold hard cash. And that's how I would think about it. The likelihood that your product is globally applicable on day one is virtually zero. Think in statistical probabilities. I also always tell this to startup companies that if you're planning to become a unicorn, you're already dead. You have to become a stallion or a little horse first, and get that really right, and then iterate and iterate and iterate. Your statistical probability to get to the point of a unicorn is virtually zero. So don't even think about it. If you get there, great, good for you. That portion of luck that I mentioned in the 3 factors that make up success was a godsend to you, and you should not take it for granted.
Yeah. So, do you think what makes product companies successful, initially at least, is really finding that perfect market fit, that
Absolutely.
that market that they know best?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. So when we started, and this is the shortened and the idolized version of it, um, but when we first have an idea as a company, when our team members have an idea, um, you know, a good idea and 25 cents gets me a cup of coffee. They're a dime a dozen. A good idea needs to be vetted on day one on the idea stage with your potential customers. And it has to be put on paper. So when we had an idea for an enterprise system that we were thinking about building and we couldn't find in the marketplace, I immediately went with the team to the potential customers and said, if we build this product, will you become a paying customer for it? And 5 of them said yes: the Washington Post, US News and World Report, Facebook, Microsoft, and Pew Charitable Trust. Sign it on paper, give me a prepayment, put cash into my bank so that I can actually have the resources to build the product. If you can get to that stage on an ideal level where your cost is virtually zero, you have an idea that is worth more than just a cup of coffee. And it has to pass that test, in my world at least. Anything else is just research and development, and you're in an ivory tower and you haven't yet put your product to the test. And you can put this product to the test much earlier than your typical entrepreneur thinks, even on an idea stage, on a PowerPoint stage.
Awesome. So, did you raise money for that company, or did you use the prepayments to build it?
We use the prepayments to build it, and then only raise. So you only really raise to step on the gas pedal. You
Okay.
always build a business. You don't build a business for an exit. You build a business to become a great business as measured in your bank account, truly, and in the happiness and satisfaction of your team and yourself, and in the life work balance that you create for everyone involved. That takes time. But we raised at a later stage, probably 6 months after we had started building the product in order to step on the gas pedal, not because we needed the money. And the only reason really that you should think about raising money is that it keeps you extremely focused. And the reason, and that is because suddenly someone has given you something and you owe that person something in return. It focuses your mind immediately. But if that is the reason why you build a product and is the precondition for you to become an entrepreneur or think that you will be successful, your mind is already upside down. It's the wrong thinking.
Yeah, yeah. So I I think when I ask entrepreneurs what do you need, the first thing they tell me is capital.
Of
I need
course,
capital. And it's really curious to hear you talk about you should only raise for scale, not to
absolutely.
build, because if you're building, you need to prove that there's a demand. And the only way to do that is if you have pre orders. Are there exceptions to that? And also, why do you think there's such an obsession with unicorns and raising capital, and why, quite frankly, venture seems to have invested some serious money into some very unprofitable companies that
Well,
may fail and take down pension funds with them.
yes, and
Is
they
that
have.
clear?
Oh,
Yeah,
it's absolutely, and I think it's really just it's how do you call it? It's delusionment. It's misguidance. It's propaganda, and it has a sexy flavor to it, but it makes no rational. Maybe I'm too German. Maybe I'm too capitalist. It makes no rational sense. My mom would have laughed me out of the room if that's how I had approached it.
yeah.
Um, and I have a counter argument to it. So think about how you invoke exponential growth. It doesn't matter how small your first product is, the first good that you give to somebody. Let's say it's a cup of coffee and it costs you $1. You have the best cup of coffee or the cheapest cup of coffee, but it's really just two, there's only two options. Either you're the best or you're the cheapest. Nothing in between, no mix of the two. If you're the best and you can sell that cup of coffee for $1, you sell your first cup of coffee, which costs you almost nothing, and you get your dollar. You reinvest that dollar into being able to produce 5 cups of coffee. And from 5 cups of coffee, you get $5 back and you reinvest them. So think about what I just said. I
Mm,
said, make the smallest possible iteration, one data point, $1, 1 cup of coffee, and then iterate from there.
mm,
And don't be linear, but keep the rate of change constant. So when you go from 1 to 5, you have quintupled your rate of return. If you can keep that rate of return constant and at quintupling at every conscious iteration, cup of coffee, software product version, you name it, you're going exponential. And the geniuses are the ones that find ways to scale in a way that you increase the rate of change at every single iteration. But it
mm.
doesn't matter that the first iteration has to be a huge coffee shop. You're already thinking too big. Boil it down to the smallest possible thing. It's a cup of coffee. Get that cup of coffee done and out the door as quickly as you can. And there is equivalence in every single entrepreneur's context. So I'm actually stretching myself because my world is enterprise software. So we have an equivalence of that. But I wanted to bring it down to something very tangible that hopefully everyone can understand,
Yeah.
and keep that focus. Did I have to raise money to create my first cup of coffee? Of course not. Did I have to raise money as I then sold my next 5 cups of coffee? Of course not. But once I get this pattern going, let's bring capital in order to go from 1,500 cups of coffee to 15,000 cups of coffee. That's when you approach investors
Okay.
as an entrepreneur.
Awesome. We have some questions from some of the entrepreneurs on the Zoom. So
Yep.
Chioma is asking, you spoke earlier about what happened when a dinosaur go extinct.
Mhm.
The space it creates for new organisms. From your perspective, what industries do you see are phasing out? and the opportunities you see at this time. I'm in the education and healthcare space, making progress accessible and family centered.
Thank you for being so elaborate here
Yeah, so
in the
poetic.
yes, very nice. So, I'm not a general entrepreneur. All I understand is enterprise software. I know who I am. I know what I know. I know what I don't know. So I don't know healthcare. I don't know education. But I've worked with education companies and with healthcare companies. We keep working with them, but always in the context of enterprise software. So the only trend that I can uh, believably convey to you is that every single industry that I'm aware of is being destroyed today. How? IT is an industry, it's a vertical. Banking or finance is a vertical. Education is a vertical. Healthcare is a vertical. But there's one vertical that is going horizontal as we speak and is cutting through all of them like the virus is cutting through our society right now at lightning speed. And that industry is IT, it's technology. And so every single vertical has to switch the way they think about their own being. And that's what I preach to my own customers, and I'm preaching it to you. I may be wrong, but this is within my small world, this is a truth. And this truth is that if you are, say, a university, or you're in a university system, if you don't manage to become a technology company that happens to provide education to students, you will die. If you're a hospital system that does not manage to become a technology company that happens to provide healthcare to patients, you will die. It's not good enough to be a university that happens to use some technology in order to provide better education. You will die. It will not be enough to be a hospital system that happens to use electronic medical records as technology, fermentation inside of your system. You will die, my world.
Yeah,
It's inevitable.
yeah. Joshua also has a question. Um, and I think, how could you further talk about ways to possibly test out ideas while it's still in PowerPoint status?
Mhm.
Um, and I'd like to relate that question to the previous question a little bit, because
Please.
as these industries are being forced to pivot, right, and we're constantly under disruption, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there, I do feel like there's a massive change right now, right? There's a massive disruption at every level, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, but it's it's nothing new. Like, it's been going, Uber disrupted the taxi industry overnight, Airbnb disrupted the hotel industry, right? So universities that are more traditional, stagnant organisms built
Mm-hmm.
to maintain the status quo
Mm-hmm.
might want to find a way of testing the changes they're implementing
Yeah.
before doing it. And how
Oh,
can you do
absolutely.
it in a low risk manner, right? Especially with things that require a terrible amount of development. So,
Yep.
like robotics, and I know you have some experience with this
I do.
in particular.
Yes. So I'll tell you the story of Phil Walker, a robotics entrepreneur who literally sat in this chair when he first met me. Um, so Phil Walker had a prototype of a robot. And this is my version of the story. Phil will remember it a little differently. And as before, this is a short summary and the idealized version of it in order to convey it more quickly and understandably. So Phil Walker came into my office with a prototype of a robot that he had built in his apartment at DuPont Circle at night while he had a full-time job. And he said, after several discussions, and I'm not a robot person, I'm an enterprise software person, but he convinced me to invest into him because he made a case that there is enterprise software is the real thing that happens to, manifest itself as a robot. So coming back to Juliana's question, why this is relevant. He said, I need to raise $1.5 million for me to build out and harden this prototype in order to become a product. And I already told him exactly what I just told you guys, that this is the wrong thinking. Whatever you put on in front of my desk, it was literally here, this prototype was sitting right in front of me, where I am sitting today. I said, this prototype needs to be able to generate cash at any iteration. So you need to think about who are your possible customers, and you need to stop tinkering with this thing at whatever stage it is today, and you need to go to potential customers and convince them that they will prepay you, or at least commit to paying you once you finish building out your product in the most minimal way possible. So 1 month goes by, and he was literally cycling in order to calm his nerves. He was in his uncomfort zone. He brought a bicycle to our office, and he circled in the backyard here while he's talking to potential customers, calming his nerves. A month goes by, him cycling in the backyard, prototype untouched. He was not allowed to touch it. And he came back and he said, and of course we talk more often, and he said, you know what? I only need to raise $1 million. I got pre-commitments of $500,000 and some cash. That's amazing. No, we're not going to raise 1 million. You're going to do it again. And he did it again. And he came back and he said, well, we're down to $500,000. Let's go. Let's raise $500,000. Nope, you're going to do it again. And he did it again. And he never had to raise any money ever again. And now he's sitting on a $2.5 million business, I believe. I don't know if this is confidential. His robots are all over the world. I think NASA just bought 2 of them, and on it goes. It's a prime example of keep it as simple and small as you possibly can in the robot world. The equivalent is true for any one of you. 0 investment.
Interesting.
Okay, I happen to give him some money. So I am his largest single investor, tiny, and he's not deluded. You know, he never had to delude himself. He's successful, and he's doing it, and he's building a great business, not for an exit, but to build a great business. And one day someone may knock on the door, but Phil will not be desperate and say, I need to sell. He will open the door, and if he likes what he sees, he may sell his robot company, but he may not, and that's okay.
Would you say that's what's made you a successful investor? Or as you call yourself, a lucky investor, that you're looking for companies that think about profit first and foremost and not about exits?
Most likely. Also, I would say the reason why is, again, going back to risk management. I invest into what I understand. I never go in a way that it has the potential to cause problems for EastBanc Tech, my team members, my family, my children, my friends, or me. So my risk is usually measured, and I say no. You will not believe how many thousands of startup pitches I've heard. I'm on the investment board of the Center for Innovative Technologies out in Northern Virginia, where we get startup pitches left and right. I'm on the board of a startup accelerator that only admits 8 startups at any given moment into a cohort. So very, very selective, and on it goes. So I've listened to thousands of startup companies. I've only invested 5 times into startup companies. I say no a lot.
Hi.
Sasha.
Well, if I had a question, and thank you for sharing all this with us.
Is this useful?
Yeah, very. Good. So just to give you just an idea, in general, the idea it's a software that would disrupt education and disassemble it in blocks as we know it. Now, of course, we all like, oh, that's such a great idea, just to keep it simple, and we started building it, but we didn't test the idea. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I like to know how I could go about testing this idea. So at some point I can say, hey, I've tested this idea and I think it works, or it doesn't seem to work. we might have to pivot to something else.
Yeah. So first of all, I don't like the term pivot anyway. Remember and thanks for asking the question directly and allowing me to see your face. It's always better than, entrepreneurs are not allowed to have fear, and entrepreneurs are not allowed to be shy. So what you just did shows me you've got the entrepreneurial bravery and courage and outspokenness that is a necessary ingredient for you. So that's number one, completely outside of your question. Number two is that as an entrepreneur, you're not allowed to be scared. You have to be able to cold call people and be able to take the pain. So if it's software that is in the education space, think of the big whale in your world that you have to focus on. So let's assume it's for universities, and maybe you admire Harvard University the most. You've got to get to Harvard University as quickly as you can to vet your idea. But in order to get there, this one you can't get wrong. This is your one shot with Harvard University, right? So you're creating this string of potential targets that get you ultimately to Harvard University. You will fail. Many people will just hang up the phone and say, Joshua, leave me alone. And this is probably the nice way of saying it. You'll hear a lot of other things. And I have myself. But you cannot have the fear. You have to call these people up and get your way up to Harvard University, if that is the equivalent in your world. And you have to fail. So what I always tell anyone is it will be inevitable for you to fail 10 times. Try to fail super, super fast, 10 times in a row. Don't go out to fail, of course, obviously. Don't try to fail, but accept the failure, analyze it. After 10 times, you will be good enough to hold your ground in front of Harvard University's, board of whatever. And you don't have to build a product along the way. It's an idea that you're, bringing up the chain. If you already have a product, even better.
What are the components of a good sales pitch, and how quickly do you personally just take out the salesy, gimmicky kind of jargon and get to the root? Like, how can an entrepreneur just cut through all the fluff and really just tell the company they're selling or the investors they're selling, whatever it may be, the client they're selling, like, this is it. This is
Again, almost unemotional. You just have to. You cannot be emotional, and so I always start with the call of action first. What I need from you is X, and now let me explain to you why that is. So they have to understand immediately what they have to be prepared to give you, be it revenue advice, feedback, a reference, whatever it may be. Call to action first, and then very quickly link that call to action up to what's in it for them, which is an ROI. But an ROI is fluff. ROI is either will they make money from what you have to, if they agree to your call of action? Will they save money from your call of action? Or will they save lives from your call to action? Each one of those three is an ROI that's worth considering for anybody, but in their context. And so your call to action has to lead to one of those three ROIs, and then you finish with, and that's why I asked you for X. And they'll very likely say, you brought this into my context, your idea into my context. You made me understand right from the beginning what you want from me. You explained to me how I'm going to make money, or save lives. And you reminded me why, what it is that you want from me. Here it is. Some of my sales cycles take literally a week or 2 or 3. Others take years, and that's okay. So, but the cadence is always the same. Call to action, 1 year, but no reaction until they're ready to hear my ROI story. Another year goes by until I remind them, and that's why I wanted you to give me X. And that's okay. That's why you run multiple of these in parallel. So you're forced not to multitask. You're doing the same thing, but you're doing it as much as your capacity allows you to do. So at any given moment, I'm probably talking to 20, 30 of these types of, my equivalent of Joshua's Harvard University. One will land one day, another one will land another year, others will never land. And that's, but it's again, risk management. It's just a numbers game. And you have to be able to handle as much as your capacity allows and preserve as much capacity for you to regenerate so you can do it again the next day. Because guess what? Every single priority that you have today will still be a priority tomorrow. But if you've killed yourself today, you won't be able to take care of it tomorrow. So make sure you balance it well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We went over a little bit, but if you have one last nugget you want to share of the failures that have cost you the most white hairs, and if you can save someone's future hair.
I think so. Not even about failures. Failures are just part of life. You've got to come to accept them. But if you remember, the title of this is Resilient Teams, and how do you build resilient teams? And there's really only one word that builds resilient teams, and that is that everyone in the team, and that's what you interview for, is they have to care. And if you don't care, they will not care. But if you don't hire for people that care about the team, the customers, your business, themselves, their families, don't hire them. Technologies will change, so don't hire for a particular technology or a particular skill. But if you get intelligent people that care and are not shy to disagree with you into your team, you build a resilient team, without any doubt.
Yeah. I'm actually going to ask 2 questions in one.
Go for it.
Okay, so I actually had made a note to ask you about this earlier, and we're going to have to do another one of these because there's so much to cover. But can I get you to say yes yet?
Of course.
Was that a good sales? Okay.
I'll be there, Juliana. I may not be able to do it fast, but I will be there.
Thank you so much. So, how can you identify people that care? Because it's so easy to fake it in an interview. Like, yes, of course I cared. This is what I wanted to do since I was 7 years old. And then they start and they see what it takes, and the caring diminishes, right? So how do you test out for that? Do you test out for that in a similar way that you test out for products?
To some degree, yes. But it's first of all, we know what it means intrinsically, what it means to care, and you also see it in people's eyes sometimes. This is so unscientific, but you kind of have a feeling when someone cares or doesn't care, and then you probe into it. What do people typically care about? Their family. Give me an example. Did you quit your job in order to take care of your grandmother? Did you work days and nights and weekends in order to push a product out the door? And you try to find these types of examples. Do you rescue dogs? Do you nurture them through until they die, or do you discard them once they're not cute anymore? Things like that will determine or will allow you to verify your gut feeling that someone cares.
Bring your dog to the interview. If they're not
Absolutely.
old, I'm not hiring you.
Yeah.
Is it a rescue? If it's not a rescue, no, I'm kidding. Well, thank you so much. Do any of you guys have any last 1-minute questions you want to ask? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Anytime you want, Juliana knows where to find me. Just send her an email and Juliana will compile it. Usually I have 45,000 unread emails, no joke. So Juliana knows how to get this email in front of me. I will quickly record a video and just cover each one of them, send it back to Juliana, and she can share it with you guys.
Thank you. That is so generous. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to pay it forward, and to share your biggest lessons. Because when you know better, you do better, and sometimes you don't know better.
That's right.
So I'm gonna start selling products I haven't built. And if I get a lot of, actually, I think there was one entrepreneur who sold a DNA test that could predict all kinds of diseases, and it turns out she hadn't built it. But that's a whole other level of product sales.
There's a fine line, right? So now you just caused me to spend another 30 minutes. That product that you have not built has to be buildable, though. So you already must have built your roadmap and your plan on how to build that product. So Phil Walker, he knew exactly how to build the product that the robot that he was dreaming about. I just stopped him from building it, but it was buildable. If you're just selling vaporware, meaning a product that doesn't exist and cannot be built, you're a liar, and don't you dare call yourself an entrepreneur.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. I sent you the bait.
Okay. Yeah. How do you product test for something you haven't built then? Like, I'm just confused.
So just like I explained before with, say, let's bring it down to the cup of coffee. You have an idea for the best coffee or the cheapest coffee. And you make, next to me is Michaela. I'm going to ask Michaela, would you mind trying my coffee? And Michaela will say, have you ever brewed any coffee? I'm not going to try your coffee. Or she will say, yes, I trust you enough. Let me try your coffee. Oh, it's the best coffee I've ever tasted. Then I know that's the direction I'm going to go. Or she'll say, well, it's not the best coffee I've ever tasted, but it better just cost me 1 cent. Then I know I have to get down to the cheapest product. But you start with these types of little nuggets of product testing. Does that make sense?
Yes, but of actual prototypes, right? Like you can, yes, I get it.
Or it could be a PowerPoint presentation where it's an idea, but you've outlined it in a way that people that you want to sell it to understand it. And then you ask the simple question: if I build this within whatever your roadmap says, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, it better be 1 month because that's the minimal viable product. If I build this in the next month, will you give me $50,000? If enough of them say yes, you've got your product and you've tested it in the marketplace.
Yeah, and just so you know, we're going to have one workshop that's going to cover paper prototyping, and it's actually going to be taught by a healthcare kind of person because it's really hard to test out healthcare products, right? Because there's a whole FDA approval process. There's a whole approval process, right?
Yes.
So it's difficult in that sense to create development, and there's a lot of investment that goes into it, and it's very risky. So raising capital in that space is also difficult. But don't worry, we'll get back to you on that question and give you more. I've taken too much of your time. I appreciate you staying over. Okay, don't kill me. One last question. Promise is the last one. So how do you surround yourself with people that will call you out on your blind spots? And is that something you interview for?
Oh, absolutely. So, when I first came to EastBanc Tech, and I actually just retold that story very recently, you have a choice to make. I have lots of buddies from the MicroStrategy years that I intrinsically trust and I've gone to war with and I've survived. And we have survived. So you have a choice to make. Do I bring in my buddies to help me run this company? Or do I respect the people that I have in the company and leave them in place and encourage them to obviously disagree with the new boss and stand up to the new boss? Of course, I make the second choice. And once you make that second choice and don't bring in your buddies, your yes men, your yes women, you will naturally create this environment, as long as you're humble and approachable, that people will go, Wolf, you're a real idiot today. or gosh darn it, can you just go to bed earlier? You're tired and you're embarrassing the company. And that kind of honesty, it has to be a willful decision you make, but it is a decision that you make that way. It's that simple.
Thank you. Thank you so
Welcome.
much.
Yeah.
Chioma wants to say goodbye. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I just put in the chat a little bit more about, what I'm building. Mostly what I'm doing now is consulting. So I do have relationships within the industries that I'm navigating and building relationships, right? But in terms of actual products that I built, it's obviously a different process than if I'm supporting them in whatever they're doing. And that is in creating care packages, right? Which would be hand delivered to families of kids with disabilities when they get a medical diagnosis, when they start their educational journey, and they have an assessment and evaluation. Now it's of course getting buy-in from schools and child development centers and hospitals that really get that first thing to really offset the cost of packaging and care and what goes in the packages, which is what actually goes in these care packages is to be discovered. And so just your thought on that product. Do you think that's something that is exciting? Are you excited hearing it? And just your general feedback in terms of its viability at this time. Well, I know it's viable at this time, but
yes, this must be the time for it.
Yeah.
But I'm as I said, I'm an enterprise software person. That's where I really understand my A to Z. And what you described, I will never quite understand from a professional level. From an emotional level, and as a human, I want you to succeed. But there's a truth in these type, and it typically involves hardware or something like hardware or like deliveries, what you just said, that require capital pretty quickly. And so nonetheless, you have to do what Jeff Bezos did when he first bought the books in the bookstore. He brought them to the post office, he packaged them up and hand mailed them out to the people that ordered on his very basic website that I still remember. And you have to do that equivalent with your care packages. Your care packages are the equivalent of those books right now. But they also, one of the iron truths in my world, yet again, and I'm sorry for overusing it, is you have to find a giant whose back you can ride. So always ride the back of giants, because who am I? I'm just Wolf. And who is EastBanc Tech? It's a no-name company. As proud as I am about it, it is still just a mosquito in the world of a jungle. And so what makes EastBanc Tech successful is that I identify the giants whose back I can ride, and they carry me along with them through their brand, through their scale, through their sophisticated problems that they may have. There must be a giant in your world that will immediately provide you that type of a scale and this type of a multiplier effect. So when I sell to customers, I don't really look for individual customers. I look for that one customer that will, by the very nature, bring me an entire education system or an entire, industry. And if I find those are my giants. Nobody may have heard of them, but those are my giants. And then they ride me into the future. Then my effort is really small, even though I do have to, put care packages together. They have to be delivered. That has to be done at scale. You can't do that by yourself, and neither can I.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, once again, and thank you so much for everything. I will not ask any more questions. In Spanish, we have a joke that's called like peor que el circo. It's what you call someone who says bye a million times, who's like, okay, bye, but bye, but one more question. Okay,
One
bye,
more
but
thing.
Shama's gonna say bye. I always fit one more in. I'm so grateful to you for being here, for taking the time. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And I will see you very, very soon. Hopefully we can do one of these when COVID passes.
Yeah.
And stay safe. Thank you.
Of course, my pleasure, and thank you for having me. And as I said, if you have questions, shoot them to Juliana, and I will reply to them in one shot.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.